I was ironing my shirt, getting ready for Sunday dinner at my son's house, and my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. It was a text from my accountant, Walter Breen. The man who has done my taxes for 26 years and has never once sent me a text message in his life. 4 words, call me right now. I set the iron down. My hand wasn't shaking. Not yet. But something in my chest went very quiet, the way a room goes quiet just before someone says something that cannot be unsaid. I called him. He picked up on the first ring. Frank. His voice was strange, flat and careful. Where are you? Are you alone? I'm at home, Walt. What's going on? He exhaled slowly. I got a call this morning from an attorney downtown, a man named Gideon Price. He's representing your son. He requested your complete financial records, tax filings, brokerage statements, the deed on your house. A pause. Frank, your son is building a case to have you declared financially incompetent. I stood there in my own bathroom in a half-ironed shirt, holding a phone to my ear, and learned that my only child wanted to take everything I had ever worked for. I am Frank Calloway. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a pharmacist, the last 12 as the head of clinical operations at a regional hospital network in Columbus, Ohio. I ran a department. I managed budgets in the millions. I reviewed drug interaction protocols that kept people alive. My mind has never once failed me. I've been a widower for 4 years. My wife, Carol, died of a heart attack in the spring. She was 61. She was healthy. She ran every morning. It made no sense, and it still makes no sense. And I've stopped trying to make it make sense. After she died, my son and his wife moved back to Columbus from Atlanta. I thought it was for me. I thought it was family. I see now what it was. Walt, I said, keeping my voice level. I have dinner at his house tonight. Cancel it. Frank, you need to cancel and say nothing until I'm not canceling. You're walking into, I know exactly what I'm walking into. The part of my brain that had spent 3 decades reading dosage charts and contraindications was clicking into gear. Cold. Systematic. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to hear what he says to my face while he's planning this behind my back. Walt was quiet for a moment. He'd known me a long time. He knew I wasn't a man who ran from things. All right, he said finally. But Frank, do not sign anything tonight. Not a thing. Not a birthday card, not a check, not a dinner napkin. You understand me? You go, you watch, and you come straight to my office after. I don't care what time it is. I hung up. I looked at the casserole dish sitting on the kitchen counter. I had spent 2 hours that afternoon making my son's favorite, a chicken and wild rice dish his mother used to make every Sunday. The recipe was on an index card in Carol's handwriting, which was the only reason I had managed to make it at all. I put it in the refrigerator. I drove across town with the radio off. It was a gray October evening, the kind that smells like wet leaves and wood smoke, the kind Carol used to call good soup weather. I had driven this road 100 times. My son's neighborhood. Nice houses, good schools, the kind of zip code that requires a certain income or a very generous father. I had been the latter. The down payment on their house had been my gift. $180,000. I told myself it was an investment in family. Carol had said, very quietly, over her morning coffee, "You know he'll never pay it back." I told her she was being unfair. We moved on. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment. The lights were on inside, warm and golden through the windows. A perfect domestic picture. I went to the door. My son opened it before I could knock. He is 41 years old. He has his mother's eyes and my chin and absolutely none of my patience for details. He gripped my hand and clapped me on the shoulder in that way he has. The big performance of warmth, all motion and no weight. "Dad, you made it." We were starting to wonder. "It's 6 o'clock, I said. "I'm always here at 6. "Huh, yeah, you are." He glanced past me at my car. "You didn't bring anything." "Forgot," I said. A flicker of something crossed his face. He filed it away. I watched him do it. My daughter-in-law came out of the kitchen drying her hands on a dish towel. She is 38, a former marketing director, who now manages the household and a very active social media presence. She smiled at me with all her teeth. "Frank, we're so glad you're here. You look tired. Are you sleeping okay?" "Fine," I said. "Sleeping fine. He just looked tired on FaceTime last week, too," she said to my son, as if I wasn't standing there. I mentioned it. "You did," he agreed. This is how it had been for months. Small observations, gentle concerns, offered to each other, over my head, in my presence, as if I were a piece of furniture they were worried was starting to wobble. Dinner was a performance in 3 acts. My son talked about the real estate market, about a development deal he was working on, about his partners and their projections. My daughter-in-law talked about my grandson's school, about his soccer league, about how much he'd grown. My grandson, who was 9, sat beside me and showed me a video on his tablet and said, "Grandpa, have you seen this one?" And I said I hadn't, and we watched a small cartoon dog do something ridiculous. And it was the only honest moment of the entire evening. Then the dishes were cleared and my daughter-in-law went to get dessert, and my son leaned forward, put his elbows on the table, and gave me the look. The concerned one. The one that had been getting more frequent. "Dad," he said, "we need to talk about something." "All right." "We've been worried about you." He said it slowly, like he was choosing each word off a shelf. "Since Mom died. It's been hard to watch. You're alone over there. You're managing all this, the house, the finances, everything, and we just think—" He glanced toward the kitchen. My daughter-in-law appeared in the doorway on cue, carrying a pie like she'd been waiting for her mark. "We think you need help." "Help," I said. "We want to take some of the weight off you." She set the pie down and put her hand over mine. Her nails were very clean. The bills, the investment accounts, just the day-to-day management. You shouldn't have to carry all of that by yourself. You deserve to just rest. I looked at my son. He nodded, earnest and worried and completely hollow. I felt something go cold in my chest. Not surprise, not even grief. Just a kind of final, locking clarity. "That's very thoughtful," I said. I kept my voice warm. I kept my face soft. "Let me think about it." His eyes lit up. For just a second, he thought he had me. I watched the relief move across his face like a shadow. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need." I ate a slice of pie. I talked about the weather. I hugged my grandson at the door and told him to work on his left foot. My son walked me to my car and put his hand on my arm and said, "We love you, Dad. We're just trying to do right by you." "I know," I said. I drove directly to Waldbreen's office. He was on the 4th floor of a building downtown, and his light was on. And when I walked in, he had 2 cups of coffee on his desk that had gone cold an hour ago. He looked at me the way old friends look at each other when something serious is happening, and neither of them wants to be the first to say it out loud. "Well?" he said. "They want to help manage my finances," I said. "Take the weight off me." He nodded. Grim. "That's the language in the petition, too." He slid a document across the desk. It was a preliminary filing. My son's attorney had requested access to 4 years of financial records, medical documentation, and a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation. The language was careful and devastating. Diminished capacity, erratic financial behavior, inability to manage complex decisions. "Erratic," I said. "They're claiming you've been making questionable decisions with your assets." I thought about the $180,000. I thought about the $52,000 I'd loaned my son's development company 2 years ago, the one that had not yet produced any returns. I thought about the $12,000 for the kitchen renovation. They said they couldn't afford. "They're calling the money I gave them evidence of my incompetence," I said. Walt looked pained. "That's the move, Frank. They're going to take everything you gave them voluntarily and reframe it as proof that you can't be trusted with your own money, and they've already retained an evaluator." He tapped another page. A psychiatrist named Dr. Arnold Fitch. I didn't know the name. He's a hired expert, Walt said. Does conservatorship cases. Has a reputation for finding what his clients need him to find. Smooth, credentialed, believable on a witness stand. He hasn't met me yet. No. They'll file a motion to have you evaluated. Good, I said. Walt looked at me. Good, I said again. Because he's going to be expecting a confused old man who forgets where he put his keys. He's not expecting me. I stood up and walked to the window. The street below was empty and wet. They built a story, Walt, but the story requires a certain version of me. And right now, I'm the only one who gets to decide which version they see. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, what are you thinking? I'm thinking I'm going to give them exactly what they want. There was a silence. I'm going to be the most forgetful man in Columbus for the next 3 weeks. A slow, reluctant smile crossed Walt's face. He picked up his pen. Start from the beginning, he said. What's the first line? The next morning I called my son at 7:45. I put a slight tremor in my voice. Just enough. Not theatrical. Real people don't tremble like actors. Real people sound tired and a little lost. Hey, it's Dad. I'm sorry to call early. I was trying to find the number for the furnace company, the one that serviced the unit last winter. I can't find where I wrote it down. He was half awake. Groggy. Dad, I sent you that number in an email, like 2 weeks ago. Did you? I'm sorry, I must have missed it. Can you text it to me? Yeah, I'll text it. Thank you. And we're still on for lunch Wednesday, right? A pause. Dad, we don't have a lunch Wednesday. Oh, I let that sit. Are you sure? I'm sure, Dad. My mistake. Sorry, son. My mistake. Sorry, son. I'm just a little foggy this morning. I hung up. Poured myself a second cup of coffee. Sat at the kitchen table and looked at the index card in Carol's handwriting, the one with the chicken recipe, which I had propped up against the sugar bowl because I like seeing her handwriting in the morning. Exactly 50 minutes later, I called him again. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find the furnace number, and I can't. Dad. His voice sharpened immediately. I just texted it to you. 45 minutes ago. You did. I made my voice confused. Soft. Oh, I don't think I got it. Check your text, Dad. It's right there. I'm looking. I don't see it. Pause. Oh, wait, is this it? Is this the one from you? Long silence. He wasn't irritated anymore. He was something else. He was interested. Yes, Dad, that's the one from me. Oh, thank goodness. I don't know what's wrong with me this morning. Must not have slept well. It's okay, he said. And his voice had changed completely. It was slow and patient and deliberate. The voice you'd use with someone who needed very careful handling. It's okay, Dad. Just get some rest. I hung up. Texted Walt, bait is set. Over the next 10 days, I was a model of careful, controlled confusion. I called my son twice about the same appointment I'd invented. I asked my daughter-in-law if I'd left my reading glasses at her house, and then called back 20 minutes later to report I'd found them, and then called once more the following afternoon to ask again. I let myself into their house for a Sunday visit that I had announced 1 week early, and stood in the foyer looking bewildered while my daughter-in-law guided me gently to the couch and made me tea and took a great deal of quiet photographs on her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She thought I wasn't looking. I had been a pharmacist for 31 years. I had spent my entire career watching people who thought they were being subtle. Meanwhile, Walt was doing the real work. He pulled their financial records. It took him 4 days and a favor from a colleague who specialized in civil litigation, and when he called me into his office the following Thursday evening, he had a yellow legal pad covered in numbers, and his face had the look of a man who had seen something genuinely ugly. Sit down, Frank. I sat. Their development company, he said. The one you loaned $52,000 to. It has 11 active creditors. The LLC filed for a debt restructuring 6 months ago. It's not a going concern. It is, to be direct, a hollow shell. I said nothing. The mortgage on their house of one you helped them buy, they refinanced it 18 months ago and pulled out $200,000 in equity. He turned a page. That money went into a second LLC, a different one, a food and beverage concept. He looked at me over his glasses. The restaurant closed in 5 months. How much? I said. The full $200,000 is gone. I put my hands flat on my desk. Walt's desk. I put my hands flat on Walt Breen's desk and breathed. There's more, he said. Of course there is. They have $90,000 in high-interest personal debt. Credit cards, a personal loan. They are currently paying minimum balances and taking cash advances to cover the minimums. He set the pad down. Frank, they are not in trouble. They are past trouble. They are in a category of financial disaster that has one realistic exit. Me, I said. Your house is worth $900,000. It's paid off. Your retirement portfolio is at about $2.3 million. Combined with the account Carol left, you're sitting at just under $3 million net. He leaned back. They're not trying to get your help. They're trying to get your everything. I sat in that chair for a long time. The loan I had given them, the down payment, the kitchen renovation. I'd been building the case against myself with my own checkbook. Walt, I said, I need to know. Is this a crime? He chose his words very carefully. Filing a fraudulent conservatorship petition with manufactured evidence and a paid expert witness against a person who is demonstrably competent? Yes. That is fraud against the court. Elder financial abuse under Ohio statute. Potentially criminal conspiracy. He looked at me, but it has to be demonstrated, not just claimed. Then we'll demonstrate it, I said. What do I need? The first thing I needed was the truth on record. Before their expert ever got near me, Walt knew a woman named Dr. Prudence Vanek. She ran the geriatric psychiatry division at Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center. She had testified as an expert witness in 7 conservatorship cases. She had never once testified for a petitioner. She had spent 20 years testifying for people just like me, competent adults, whose families had decided their age was more useful than their continued independence. She came to my house on a Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock. She was in her mid-60s, compact and precise, with the kind of eyes that cataloged everything. She didn't make small talk. She sat across from me at the dining room table, opened a folder, and said, I'm going to be very direct with you, Mr. Calloway. My report will reflect what I find, not what you want me to find. Is that understood? That's exactly what I want, I said. She tested me for 2.5 hours. Orientation questions, memory sequences, abstract reasoning, mathematical tasks. She had me repeat strings of numbers forward and backward. She asked me to interpret proverbs. She showed me a pattern of shapes and asked me to identify the next in the sequence. Then she asked me to draw a clock. I looked at her. What time would you like? 10 minutes after 11. I picked up the pen. I thought about my years reading prescription labels, compounding orders, interaction charts. I thought about the spatial precision of that work, the way you had to hold 3 systems in your mind simultaneously and find where they intersected. I drew a circle, clean. I placed the 12, the 6, the 3, the 9 first, then filled in the remaining numbers with measured spacing. I drew the hour hand at the 11, the minute hand pointing at the 2, both correctly proportioned. Then, because it seemed like the honest thing to do, I labeled the hands, minute, hour, and I added a small notation beneath the clock, 11:10 a.m. Dr. Vanek looked at the drawing for a moment. She made a note. You were a pharmacist, she said. Head of clinical ops, I said. Retired 3 years ago. Do you still manage your own investment accounts? I rebalanced my bond allocation in January. I'm averaging about 6.4% annually over the last 5 years. I can show you the statements if it's helpful. She wrote something else down. Mr. Calloway, are you under unusual stress currently? I looked at her. My son is attempting to have me declared incompetent so he can liquidate my assets to cover approximately $300,000 in personal and business debt. Is that what you mean by unusual? She held my gaze for a moment. Then the corner of her mouth moved, very slightly. Yes, she said. That qualifies. When the evaluation was finished, she packed her folder, clicked her pen, and stood. I'll have a full report to Mr. Breen's office by end of day tomorrow, she said. It will state that you demonstrate no measurable cognitive decline, no impairment of executive function, and no deficits in financial reasoning or decision-making capacity. She looked at me directly. Your score on the MMSE is 30 out of 30, Mr. Calloway. Perfect. I want you to know that. I appreciate it, I said. I know Dr. Fitch, she said, and something in her tone became very precise. I have reviewed his reports in other cases. If he files a declaration that contradicts these findings, I will appear in court and I will dismantle it in detail. She picked up her bag. Have a good day. I watched her car pull out of the driveway. It was a sensible car, a 9-year-old Subaru with a parking sticker from the hospital on the windshield. The trap was set. Now I had to let them walk into it. The call came 3 days later. Dad. My son's voice was bright in a way that didn't reach anywhere real. How are you feeling? Any better? A little tired, I said, injecting just enough weariness. These cold mornings get to me. I know. Listen, I was talking to a friend of mine, Dr. Fitch. He's a senior health specialist. Not a regular doctor, more like he just talks with people. He helps older folks stay sharp, manage their energy. He mentioned he's going to be near your neighborhood next Thursday. And I thought, well, it might be nice for you to just have a conversation with him. Low-key. Just a chat. There it was. They were not going to file a motion to compel an evaluation. That would tip their hand. That would give Walt time to object, time to respond, time to put Dr. Vanek's report in front of a judge first. No. They were going to bring the weapon directly to my door and call it a friendly visit, get the informal evaluation done, file the full petition with Fitch's report already attached, and blindside me before I had time to respond. It was smarter than I'd expected. I don't know, I said, making my voice uncertain. I'm not much for strangers. Dad, he's a friend. It's just a conversation. He's very warm. You'll like him. What could it hurt? I let the silence run a few seconds too long. Let him think I was deliberating. Well, I said finally, if you think it would help, it'll be great. He'll come by at 11 Thursday morning. I'll be there too, just to make you comfortable. Okay, I said. Thursday at 11. You'll be there. I'll be there, he said. And the warmth in his voice was like sunlight through a window in a house that was burning down. I called Walt the moment we hung up. Thursday at 11, I said. The expert is coming to the house. My son will be there. Perfect, Walt said. And then, quietly, the cameras, already in. I had installed them myself 2 days after my first conversation with Walt. I did not hire anyone. I did not want a stranger's name attached to anything. I bought 3 compact, wide-angle lenses from a specialty supplier on the east side of town, a high-sensitivity audio unit, and a small encrypted server that would push footage directly to a cloud account that only Walt and I had access to. I placed the first camera in the living room bookshelf, between the copy of the Merck manual and Carol's old birdwatching guide. It had an unobstructed view of the sofa, the armchair, and the coffee table. The second was in the entryway, angled down from the top of the coat closet. The third was in my home office, where I sometimes invited people to sit. Walt had already confirmed with a colleague that Ohio's recording law, a one-party consent state, unlike Washington, meant I needed only my own knowledge and consent to record conversations in my home. I was the only party required. Every second of footage was legal. Every word was admissible. The house was ready. I just had to play my part. Thursday arrived gray and cold. At 10:58, a black sedan pulled up in front of the house. My son got out first. Then a man I'd never seen. Tall, silver hair, the kind of tan you get from somewhere warm and expensive. He was wearing a sport coat that cost more than my first car. He looked like a man who had spent many years being believed. This was Dr. Arnold Fitch. I met them at the door. I moved slowly. I looked a little uncertain on my feet, the way a man might look who had been resting indoors for several days. My son held my elbow briefly, and I let him. "Dad, this is Arnold. Dr. Fitch." Fitch extended his hand. His grip was practiced and just warm enough. "Frank, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for welcoming me into your home." "Come in," I said. "Can I get you something?" "I was going to make coffee, but I couldn't find it." I gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. "You know, the thing." "The carafe?" my son said. "Right, the carafe," my son said. "Right, the carafe." I shook my head. "Anyway, come in." We sat in the living room. My son took the armchair. Fitch settled on the love seat and crossed his legs and opened a small leather notebook. The camera on the bookshelf had a perfect line to his face. "So," Fitch said, his voice warm and slow the way you'd speak to someone you'd already decided was fragile. "Your son tells me you've had a few rough patches lately. Feeling a bit overwhelmed?" "Not overwhelmed," I said. "Just, the house is big. Carol used to handle a lot of things." "Of course. Grief takes a real toll." He made a note. "How long has it been?" 4 years. "And you're managing the property yourself? The finances?" "I try to," I said. And I looked down at my hands like the question was slightly too much for me. This went on for a while. He asked gentle questions with stones hidden in them. Did I ever get confused about appointments? Had I found myself repeating things? Had I noticed any changes in my memory? I answered each one with just enough hesitation, just enough fog, to give him what he had come for. Then he said, "Frank, would you be willing to try a small exercise for me? Just something I use to get a sense of how people are doing. It's very simple." He pulled a blank sheet of paper from his notebook and placed it on the coffee table. "I'd like you to draw a clock for me, put in all the numbers, and then set the hands to 10 minutes past 11. My son leaned forward slightly. This was the moment they had come for. I picked up the pen. I drew the circle. I placed the numbers with the spacing of a man who had spent decades reading tiny print. I placed the hands correctly, proportioned correctly, labeled correctly, and then, because I could not help it, because it was simply the way my mind worked, I added a small legend in the corner. H equals hour hand. M equals minute hand. 11:10 a.m. Fitch stared at the drawing. "What does that notation mean?" he asked. "I just labeled them," I said in my slightly bewildered voice. "So it was clear which was which. Is that wrong?" He looked at my son. Something passed between them. An adjustment. "No," Fitch said, forcing the warm smile back. "No, that's very thorough." He folded the paper and put it in his jacket. "Very thorough indeed." He wrapped up shortly after. The professional manner was still intact, but the ease had gone out of it, replaced by something more careful, more calculated. He shook my hand at the door and said it had been a pleasure, and that he'd be in touch with my son. My son lingered after Fitch got in his car. "That went well," he said, and I could hear him trying to convince himself as much as me. "He seemed nice," I said. My son put his hand on my shoulder. "We're going to figure this all out, Dad. Don't worry." I nodded slowly like a man who was grateful for the help. I closed the door. I walked to my office, sat down at my desk, opened the laptop, and stopped the recording. I saved it. I named the file Exhibit B and uploaded it to the encrypted server. Then I called Walt. "It's done," I said. "Fitch has what he thinks he needs." "So do we," Walt said. "Dr. Vanek's report came in this morning. 13 pages. Notarized. Her language is—" I heard him exhale. "Frank, she used the word extraordinary twice. What's next? We wait for them to file. And when they do—" A pause. "I need to tell you something. When I was pulling the financial documents this week, I found something I wasn't expecting. His voice had changed. Careful and quiet. Were you aware of a trust account at Huntington Bank, under the name Calloway Family Trust? I was very still. No, I said. I was not. It was opened 6 years ago. The account holder is listed as Carol Ann Calloway. Saul Grantor, you're listed as the lifetime beneficiary. Another pause. There's a successor trustee listed as well, someone named Delia Marsh. I sat with the phone against my ear and I couldn't speak for a moment. Delia Marsh. My wife's youngest sister. Quiet, serious Delia, who was a CPA in Cincinnati, who sent me a handwritten card every year on Carol's birthday, who had driven 4 hours to sit with me the week after the funeral and hadn't said much of anything but had been exactly the right kind of present. The one my son had never paid much attention to because she wasn't the kind of woman he thought was worth paying attention to. Walt, I said. Is this what I think it is? Come to my office, he said. There's a letter. I drove to Huntington Bank first. I had Carol's death certificate. I had her marriage certificate. I had my own ID and the copy of the will that named me executor. It took 45 minutes and 2 managers and 1 phone call to their trust department. But eventually, a woman led me into a small room in the vault and set a metal box on the table and closed the door and left me alone. The box was not heavy. Inside was a single envelope. Cream-colored, my name on the front in Carol's handwriting. I sat down in the chair in that cold, quiet little room, and I held that envelope for a long time before I opened it. My darling Frank, the letter began, if you are reading this, then I am gone. And this key found its way to you, which means what I was afraid might happen has begun to happen. I am so sorry. I am sorry for the secret. In 40 years of marriage, I kept almost nothing from you. And keeping this was the hardest thing I have ever done, but I had to. Please understand. I had to. I read slowly. My hands were steady. My eyes were not. She had written the letter the week she was diagnosed. Not with the heart attack. They didn't know about that. No, she had written it 10 years earlier, when the doctors had found a lump, and the lump had turned out to be benign. But the fear of those 3 weeks had clarified something for her that she had been pushing to the back of her mind for years. She had seen it, she wrote. She had seen the pattern clearly. The way our son always came to us when something went wrong. The way something was always going wrong. The way the asking had grown larger over the years, the amounts bigger, the reasons more elaborate, the repayments less and less discussed. She had seen the way he looked at our house. The way he'd asked, once, casually, what we were thinking of doing with the cabin up north when we got older. She had seen something in his eyes when he asked, and she had not been able to forget it. She wrote, You always believed the best of him, Frank. That is one of the things I love most about you. But I have always believed the truth of him, and they are not the same thing, and I am afraid of what happens to when I am not there to say so. So she had done something. Over 6 months, she had quietly restructured. A meeting with Delia's firm, a trust attorney in Cincinnati. The process had been meticulous and discreet. Carol had been a bookkeeper for 20 years before she retired, and she understood the mechanics of this better than most people would. She had moved our home into the trust. She had transferred the investment accounts. She had, in the language of the document, conveyed all principal assets of the marital estate into an irrevocable structure that named me as lifetime beneficiary and Delia as successor trustee. The house, she wrote, is no longer just yours in the usual sense. You have full right to live there for the rest of your life. All income from the investments flows to you as it always has. Nothing about your daily life changes at all. But the assets belong to the trust, not to you personally, which means no one can compel you to sell them. No court can order you to liquidate. No petition filed by anyone for any reason can touch the principal. You are protected, Frank. I made sure of it. And then I turned the page, and there was one more paragraph, and my breath caught. She had written a contingency clause in the event that any named beneficiary of this trust, and here she had specified our son by full name, his wife by full name, and any entity associated with them, should take legal action against the trust or against the lifetime beneficiary in an attempt to seize, control, or direct the disposition of trust assets, the following shall occur automatically and irrevocably. Said party shall be disinherited from any and all future interests in this trust, and their children shall be deemed to have no claim in perpetuity. She had written beneath it in her own hand, non-typed. If he tries this, it ends everything. I prayed he wouldn't. I planned as though he would. I sat in that vault room for a long time. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. I was experiencing something I didn't have a name for. Something that felt like grief and gratitude and awe, all pressing against the same point in my chest simultaneously. My wife, my Carol, who ran every morning and made good soup and kept the books and never raised her voice and saw things clearly and loved me for 37 years. My wife had done all of this from the other side of a health scare. From her own fear for me, she had built a fortress and hidden the key in a place she knew I would only find if I needed it. She had been planning my defense for 10 years. I walked out of that bank into the gray Columbus afternoon, and I sat in my car, and I said out loud, to no one, to her, "You were right about him. I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." Then I drove to Walt's office, and we got to work. The hearing was 2 weeks later in Franklin County Common Pleas Court. My son arrived with his attorney, a sharp-faced man named Calder Price, who had the look of someone who had won enough cases to be overconfident. My daughter-in-law was beside him, dressed carefully, arranged in an expression of loving concern. They sat at the petitioner's table and did not look at me, except in the quick, glancing way people look at things they have already decided are finished. They had filed the petition 8 days earlier. Dr. Fitch's declaration was attached. 17 paragraphs of clinical-sounding language that described a man of declining judgment, obsessive and rigid behavior, memory impairment, and reduced capacity for financial reasoning. He cited the clock drawings specifically. Subject demonstrated perseverative behavior and an inability to execute simple two-step instructions, instead fixating on unnecessary detail as a manifestation of early-stage executive dysfunction. He had taken my precision and renamed it a symptom. The judge was a woman named Judge Patricia Ogden. She had been on the bench for 14 years. She was not the kind of judge who made you feel comfortable, which is exactly the kind of judge I needed. Price opened for the petitioner. He was smooth. He painted a picture of a loving son, a worried family, a man who had once been sharp but was now struggling in ways that put his substantial estate at risk. He spoke of repeated phone calls, missed appointments, an incident with the furnace, a man becoming lost in his own house. He spoke of generous gifts that exceeded reason, of a father who was not equipped to protect himself. My stomach was very calm throughout all of it. Fitch took the stand. He was polished. He had the Hopkins credentials, the case history, the measured vocabulary of someone who had testified many times and knew how to make a courtroom believe him. He described our conversation. He described my responses as evasive and perseverative. He described the clock. Walt let him finish. Then he stood up. "Dr. Fitch," he said, "you testified that you are a board-certified forensic psychiatrist." "That's correct." "And the declaration you filed with this court, you signed that declaration before you ever met my client." A pause. I formed a preliminary assessment based on the detailed behavioral history provided by. "A yes or no will be fine, doctor." "Did you sign a sworn declaration about my client's competency before you met him?" "I signed a preliminary declaration, yes." "Thank you. Now you describe the clock drawing as evidence of perseveration, of fixation, of executive dysfunction." Walt walked to the evidence table and picked up the drawing, which had been submitted as part of Fitch's exhibit. He held it up. "Doctor, are you a pharmacist?" "No." "Have you ever worked in clinical pharmacy? Drug interaction protocols? Compounding?" "Of course not." "So you would have no professional experience with the kind of spatial precision and systematic detail orientation that characterizes 3 decades of clinical pharmaceutical work?" Fitch shifted. "I'm not sure what the notation on the clock, the labels, the legend. You called it fixation. Is it possible that what you observed was simply the habitual precision of a man who spent his career in an environment where imprecision kills people? Price objected. Walt withdrew, but he looked at the judge when he did it, and the judge was already looking at the drawing. Then Walt called Dr. Vanek. She walked to the stand with the unhurried certainty of someone who did not need the room's approval. She stated her name and her position and her 30 years of practice, and the courtroom was very quiet. Walt asked her what she had found. I found a man in excellent cognitive health, she said. Orientation intact, memory intact, executive function intact, memory intact, executive function intact, abstract reasoning in the 95th percentile for his age cohort. MMSE score 30 out of 30. A small sound from the petitioner's table, my daughter-in-law's chair. And in your professional opinion, Walt said, does Mr. Calloway demonstrate any impairment of his capacity to manage his own financial affairs? None whatsoever, Dr. Vanek said. In my judgment, he is more than capable of managing significantly more complex financial affairs than he currently has. She paused. I also reviewed Dr. Fitch's declaration. In my professional opinion, it is not a good faith clinical assessment. It is a document engineered to reach a predetermined conclusion. The methodology is inadequate, the behavioral interpretations are selectively applied, and the clock drawing analysis in particular represents a fundamental misreading of the subject's cognitive style. She looked briefly in Fitch's direction. I've reviewed Dr. Fitch's work in other cases. This is consistent with his pattern. Fitch's chair made a sound. Judge Ogden raised her hand slightly and everyone went still. Walt said, no further questions, and sat down. Price tried to cross-examine Dr. Vanek. It did not go well for him. She answered each question with precision and patience, and made him look, each time, as though he had walked into a room and forgotten why he came. When he finally sat down, Walt stood again. Your Honor, the respondent has one additional exhibit. He nodded to the court officer, who dimmed the lights. The monitor on the courtroom wall came to life. It was my living room. Camera angle from the bookshelf. My son in the armchair, Dr. Fitch on the love seat, me on the sofa. The video was clear, and the audio was clean, and every word was audible. We watched Fitch arrive. We heard him ask his leading questions. We heard my son confirm the appointment time for Fitch's benefit. We watched Fitch take the clock drawing, fold it, and put it in his jacket. And then Walt paused the video. Your Honor, he said, I would like to direct the court's attention to the clock drawing that Dr. Fitch has just pocketed. The same drawing he described in his declaration as evidence of perseveration and executive dysfunction. He looked at the judge. That drawing was graded on camera. Every stroke is visible. We would ask the court to reconcile Dr. Fitch's characterization with what is actually depicted. Judge Ogden said, play the rest. We did. By the time the video ended, Price had stopped writing on his legal pad. My son was very still. My daughter-in-law was looking at a point on the wall slightly above everyone's heads. Judge Ogden took off her reading glasses. She cleaned them with a cloth from her robe pocket. She put them back on. She looked at the petitioner's table for a moment. Mr. Meterai, Price, she said, her voice very even. I have some questions about the declaration filed by your expert witness. Specifically, I have questions about the timeline of that declaration relative to Dr. Fitch's first meeting with the respondent. She let that sentence settle. I also have some questions about the behavioral documentation in your petition, which appears to describe events that, based on this recording, were staged by the respondent for the specific purpose of being documented. She looked at him steadily. I'd like you to explain to me how a court is supposed to evaluate a petition that is built on manufactured evidence. Price said something. I don't remember what. It didn't matter. The petition for conservatorship of Frank Calloway, Judge Ogden said, is dismissed with prejudice. It can't be refiled. She set her glasses on the bench. I am referring this matter to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office with a recommendation that they evaluate the conduct described herein for potential criminal charges, including fraud upon the court and elder financial abuse. She looked at my son for the first time, directly. I am also referring Dr. Fitch's declaration to the Ohio State Medical Board. The gavel came down. I walked out of that courtroom into the hallway, and Walt was beside me, and we stood there for a moment without saying anything, which is what you do when a very large thing has just ended. My son came through the doors a few minutes later. His attorney was already on his phone, walking fast toward the elevator. My daughter-in-law was behind my son, not touching him, not looking at him. He stopped when he saw me. He looked at me for a long moment. The concern was gone. The warmth was gone. Whatever performance he'd been maintaining for months, it had run out, and what was underneath it was something I didn't have a word for. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something smaller and colder than either. "You recorded me," he said. "Ohio is a one-party consent state," I said. He shook his head slowly, like I had done something unspeakable to him. "We needed that money, Dad." I looked at my son, my only child, the boy I had driven to swim practice at 6 a.m. for 4 years, the boy I had sat with in the hospital when he broke his collarbone at 12, the boy whose entire adult life I had quietly subsidized in ways I had always told myself were love. "I know," I said. "I know you needed it. I've been watching you need money for 20 years, and every time I gave you more, I thought I was helping you. I was wrong about that. But I was also wrong about something bigger." I kept my voice even. There was no anger left in it. Just a kind of clear, exhausted truth. I was wrong to let you believe that my retirement was a problem you could solve. He didn't say anything. "The assets," I said, "are in a trust. Your mother set it up 10 years ago. Delia is the trustee. You were disinherited the day you filed that petition. That's not me telling you that's your mother. She anticipated this, and she wrote it into the document herself." He went very still. "She knew?" he said. "She knew?" I said. "And she loved you anyway. She just loved me more." I left him standing in that hallway with that. I walked to the elevator with Walt, and we went downstairs and outside into the gray October air, and I breathed for the first time in weeks, like someone who is standing on solid ground. Delia came up from Cincinnati the following weekend. She brought a coffee cake and the quarterly trust statement, and we sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten Sunday dinners alone for 4 years, and she spread out the documents and walked me through everything Carol had built. The investment allocation, the income distributions, the charitable giving schedule, because of course there was a charitable giving schedule. Carol had always given to the free health clinic on the east side of Columbus, the one that served uninsured families, the one she'd volunteered at on weekends for 8 years. She had written into the trust that 15% of annual net income would go there in perpetuity, in her name. She had turned her fear for me into something that would outlast both of us. She was something, Delia said, looking at the pages. "She was," I said. "I have not heard from my son since the courthouse hallway. I don't know what that silence means, and I have found, to my own mild surprise, that I am not spending much time trying to figure it out. Some doors, when they close, are telling you something. I am trying to listen. What I know is this. I am 68 years old, and I live in a house that is paid for and quiet in the way that a house gets quiet when you have finally stopped waiting for something bad to happen. My coffee is hot in the mornings. Carol's recipe card is still on the counter. My grandson, who stayed out of all of this because he is 9 and innocent, and I intend to keep him that way still, calls me on Sundays and shows me videos of small cartoon animals doing things that make no sense, and I still say I haven't seen that one, which is sometimes even true. Walt Breen told me last week that Dr. Fitch surrendered his license rather than face the medical board review. Price was censured by the State Bar. The criminal referral is, as of this writing, still pending. I am not waiting on any of it. What I am waiting on is spring. Carol planted tulip bulbs along the front walk every fall for 20 years, and every April they come back, red and yellow, mixed together the way she liked them, the way she said looked like something a child would choose. And there was nothing wrong with that. They don't know anything about what happened this winter. They just come back because that's what they do. I plan to be here when they do. There are things I learned from all of this that I did not expect to learn. I learned that love and blindness can look identical from the inside. I learned that the people we protect most fiercely are sometimes the people we are protecting from the truth about themselves. I learned that my wife saw clearly what I chose not to see, and that she did not hold it against me. She just made a plan. I learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone you love is simply refuse to let them take everything you have left. If you have ever had to draw a line like that with a person you raised, a person you would have done anything for, then you know the particular exhaustion of it. You know that it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving. And some days, surviving is enough.